One of the misconceptions in the red and near-infrared light therapy, the photobiomodulation space, is that more intensity is always better. So sunlight is extremely important for human health, including UVA, UVB light. Secondly, what I didn't want to do is basically just take existing products from, let's say, Alibaba or whatever else exists, put my logo on it, and basically say, oh yeah, I created something. Sunlight for health is essential. In excess, it becomes toxic.
So hello today, Matt Maruca of RaOptics. We've known each other for many years, since 2017, I think.
Yeah.
You've been wonderful in the light and health space, and you've got lots of new developments, I've heard. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Bart. I appreciate you having me. Likewise.
Yeah. We're in Austin, Texas today with the Health Optimization Summit. You've been going through a lot. Can you first tell me a little bit about the latest developments in light and health? I know that you've talked to some experts and are deeply connected to Alexander Wunsch, etc.
Yeah. So as far as developments in light and health, Alexander Wunsch is our chief scientific officer now at RaOptics. So I'm very fortunate to have the privilege to work with him on a very regular basis. And the reason I approached him is because I wasn't interested in just trying to come up with stuff myself, because I'm not the expert as far as, somebody who's been in the field for 35 plus years with a PhD, medical doctor who's treated patients clinically for a long time. So I wanted to go to the top experts and work with them to develop the best products in the world. Secondly, what I didn't want to do is basically just take existing products from, let's say, Alibaba or whatever else exists, put my logo on it, and basically say, oh yeah, I created something. Because I didn't create anything. In that case, I would have just kind of copied something. So at RaOptics, what I'm interested in doing is innovating in a meaningful way, taking the science and using it to create new products that can actually transform lives. Or if we're going to go into a category like red light therapy, where it already exists and it's very well established, we want to do something significantly better than what everyone else is doing. Otherwise, we're just another one of them. So that's my approach to product development and so on. As far as meaningful innovations and developments in light and health, something that comes to mind is having worked with Dr. Wunsch. Years ago, I was following, a kind of different approach, a different way of understanding in the circadian health and biohacking community, which was about getting as much sunlight as you can to kind of sun your eyes. And I really believe that. In fact, I went ahead and I shared that with the world, and I spoke about it all the time as if I knew what I was talking about 100%. And in retrospect, after working with Dr. Wunsch, I've learned that it's not always the case that we want more sunlight, So I don't believe the World Health Organization's idea that sunlight is always bad and carcinogenic. But I also no longer believe the opposite, that we should get as much sun as we can and that no amount of sun is really harmful or damaging or can cause damage. I mean, I think I personally aged my own skin a bit by overdosing on sun for years and burning and thinking, oh, this won't be a problem, it won't be an issue. And I don't know what the long-term consequences of that are. I maintain a positive mindset. I do the right things for my health to improve, everything in my entire health, my body and everything. But I just don't believe this idea. And in fact, it's not just about my belief, but I'm convinced that the evidence doesn't support that, I would say, kind of niche and extreme idea that more sunlight is always better.
Yeah.
Now, I think the people sharing that idea have good intentions in general and want to help people, and they're absolutely reacting. So what Dr. Wunsch taught me is you have the thesis in any argument, an antithesis, and a synthesis, which is usually somewhere in the middle, right? And the thesis was, well, World Health Organization, sunlight is carcinogenic. No sun. Use chemical sunscreens, which we know are toxic. You shouldn't use those. I don't encourage that. Then the antithesis is, well, sunlight's never bad. UVA is amazing. Get more. It doesn't really matter if you burn. The synthesis is actually somewhere in the middle. So sunlight is extremely important for human health, including UVA, UVB light, but within moderation. So the heliotherapists of the last decade, experts like Auguste Rollier, who was a French-Swiss doctor, he used sunlight therapy, in other words, heliotherapy, Greek god Helios, god of the sun, in order to treat all sorts of diseases, from tuberculosis of the skin to severe wounds to depression to rickets in the bones and all sorts of other conditions. But their approach to heliotherapy was very meticulous and very diligent. they would roll patients on their hospital bed into the sun. So their feet were in the sun for just a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes the first day. And then that was it. And then the next day, they'd roll the feet for 5 minutes. And then after 5 minutes, they'd roll them out further so their lower leg was in the sun for 5 minutes. So in the end, the feet were in the sun 10 minutes, and then the lower leg for 5 minutes. And they'd continue that process, adding another part of the body each day until they'd get to the face or to the torso. And if the torso had accepted the treatment and the body was accepting the light without any adverse reactions, then they would only then expose the head and the face as well as the most delicate, sensitive area. And to me, this is a very intelligent approach, a very intelligent and sensible way to manage heliotherapy, just like any other therapy. You wouldn't just go out and start overdosing or dosing massively on any drug to try to get an effect, unless you're, trying to have a psychedelic crazy trip. But when it comes to sunlight, that's probably not the best idea. So that to me has been a huge development. And it took approximately 2 years of me working with Wunsch for him to slowly, and he didn't try very hard because he knew I would reject it, but to plant the seeds for me to realize that more sunlight's not actually always better. And UVA and UVB light, although they have essential health benefits and are important for health to a certain extent, in excess cause issues.
Yeah.
And sun worship as such may not be such a good idea, I'm starting to believe. So these shorter wavelengths are phototoxic for simple-celled organisms, and for our cells, they also have similar effects when experienced in excess. So our system, the reason we can handle strong solar radiation or any solar radiation with UV, and bacteria, for example, cannot, UV light kills bacteria, is because we've developed all sorts of mechanisms to be able to utilize, absorb, but also protect from and mitigate the light. And so protect and mitigate being a key word. We can manage that exposure and those negative effects and risks, but only to a certain extent. And if you go past a certain extent, as anybody has experienced before who's had a sunburn, you realize that the light isn't necessarily your friend in excess. Sunburn is a reactive oxygen species intoxication in the skin. And this is not really good, actually. It's not beneficial. Gradual buildup of sun exposure is a smart and intelligent thing to do. White person like me or you going to Austin, which is a really low latitude, or even further south, Costa Rica, Mexico, can be really problematic, especially if we're not acclimated. And so it makes sense to accommodate intelligently and slowly. And this is something in my belief that has changed significantly. I'll just finish that with, I don't think people should avoid the sun per se. I think most people are vitamin D deficient. That's what the evidence says. They're just clear research. And people should get out more and expose themselves to natural light and build up their vitamin D and get all the other benefits, the circadian stimulus, and so on and so forth, the secretion of key hormones and neurotransmitters. But that doesn't mean more is always better.
Yeah.
Right?
Just like exercise. If you never exercise, you shouldn't also try to run half a marathon or a marathon, right? You should slowly ease into it. A little bit.
I would say so. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a huge development in my perspective in the world of light and health. And somebody like Wunsch, I think the reason Dr. Wunsch has taken this stance is because he sees how his work and his teachings were misunderstood and misconstrued by certain people and certain leaders and followers and individuals in especially the biohacking world, to have a different meaning than what he originally intended. And so now his aim, as I understand, is to try to clarify that meaning so as not to cause harm, because doctors' creed is to do no harm. And so you want to not have your own information be misunderstood. So I'll leave it with that.
Sure. So that's mostly about the UVA, UVB, important, but don't overdo it. Slowly,
Absolutely.
Slowly accumulate to it. Then there's also some very new, interesting developments on the other parts of the light spectrum, right? On visible lights. We talked yesterday a little bit about the green light, and now that's infrared. And of course, the development that you're eventually going to come out with a RaOptics pack.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can, gladly. So what I've become interested in is, again, how we can take the science of light and use it to create new and innovative products, even if they're based on older concepts and ideas. Of course, that's how we grow. We stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us, who built these amazing ideas, like people who figured out how to quarry stone, people who figured out how to pour concrete, people who figured out how to weld steel, right? I didn't invent steel. And if somebody builds a bridge, they didn't invent steel either, but they're leveraging the technology of steel and metalworking that was created by somebody very, very long ago. So we do the same thing. We all have to build off of the past and create something even better for the future. And so one thing that definitely interests me is the use of different colors of light. I'm not going to say too much about that right now, only because it's something we haven't developed and shared yet ourselves, and it's something I would be remiss to share a lot about before we've actually created a practical solution for people. But there's a lot of potential, I'll just say, in other wavelength ranges of light besides UVA, UVB, besides blue light for circadian activation, besides red and near infrared light, for example. And different combinations of different wavelengths or different colors can have all sorts of effects. So to me, this is something that is a very interesting possibility or frontier in light and light therapy. So I do see a lot of potential there. We're also very interested in the potential applications of healthy, high quality lighting. We have some developments coming out probably much sooner than the more therapeutic developments. I don't have exact timelines, but as far as lighting developments, we have some really interesting lighting products that focus on creating healthy, high quality, hormonally neutral lights, which can allow the body to basically function as it's optimally designed without disruption, without overstimulation, without melatonin suppression or preventing melatonin release, giving people the best quality of light, the best experience under their light. So we're working on some really interesting developments, as far as that is concerned.
And I know that Alexander Wunsch, with the indoor lighting, he's also been an expert on that topic, and he's talked about that for decades, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more? Yeah, this may be interesting. With the sun, there's so much context, right? Because you showed me some spectrometer readings. This is interesting for the people. What?
Of course, yeah.
If you're on concrete and you take a reading, or if you're in grass, or even just pointing about the grass, there's a very different way in which the light interacts with our skin, our eyes, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had no idea about this. When I was in the world of believing that the sun is always good and more is always better, effectively, I didn't even have any context or any idea that different wavelengths of light are present in different proportions in different external environments. Okay, we understand that different times of day and different times of year have different ranges of light. So when the sun is at a higher angle, it has more shorter wavelength light relative to longer wavelength light. When it is at a lower angle, such as sunrise or sunset, there's much more long wavelength light, more healing and regenerative side of the spectrum relative to the short wavelength light. We know that different atmospheric conditions, such as more moisture in the air, can change the spectrum because water absorbs certain wavelengths of light, in particular in the near infrared range. We know that different pollutants can modify the spectrum of light, and different conditions of the ozone layer, for example, could potentially also affect the light. Although I'm less convinced that the ozone layer degrading is a real issue, but I just don't really know, to be honest, about that. So I won't comment on that. But anyhow, what I didn't realize is that just the materials in your environment have such a significant effect. And again, working with an expert like Wunsch, I became aware of something I was totally unaware of, and most people are unaware of. So pointing the spectrometer, for example, just yesterday, out here onto the asphalt, towards not even down, just outward, just the same way your eyes are looking, the same light your eyes are receiving. Pointing it outward, there's concrete and pavement and asphalt for cars and everything. And when I step out there, I can feel, oh, it's really bright. Oh, that's quite intense, right? But I never really thought about why and how that spectrum might be different from a green environment like we have over there behind us, the more chlorophyll-rich environment. Well, what you see is when you point the light out towards asphalt or concrete or any city with reflective glass, which is often absorbing UV, but reflecting back, absorbing infrared, but reflecting back ultraviolet. Glass, asphalt, concrete, metal, the materials that build our cities, all exhibit fairly similar effects as far as reflecting the shorter wavelength, more deleterious, more damaging, more harmful, more oxidative range of the light spectrum, while absorbing the red and near infrared, the more regenerative wavelengths, which of course you guys are all about. So just by being in a city in an artificially built environment, you have this effect of a shift of the spectrum towards the shorter wavelength, more deleterious effects. Now, the same effect is present on a beach, on water, even on snow, for example. So these are highly reflective surfaces, and Inuits, for example, made sunglasses of bone with small slits to prevent snow blindness. Cultures throughout history understand that if the sun is at its strongest, you don't generally want to be in the sun longer than you need to, especially at midday sun. You try to get in the shade. You do what you need to do, and then you get into the shade, and that's what animals do and so on. I'm not saying people shouldn't sunbathe. I'm not saying people shouldn't go outside. I'm not saying people should live inside all day behind windows and glass, just so people don't misunderstand the message. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is that it makes sense, based on the evidence, that if you're going to use the sun for therapeutic purposes, to be meticulous and diligent about your exposure, to use it like a therapy in a targeted, intentional way. And that being out and about, if you're in all sorts of different environments, and this is what Dr. Wunsch is saying as well, it's not just me. I am fortunate to work with top experts. I don't want to claim actually any longer to be some kind of expert. One, really, there are people who know so much more than I do. I do my best to take the information, to understand it, and to pass it forward to people in the form of applicable tools for their life. So when we look at the chlorophyll spectrum, on the other hand, and where did humans evolve? Where did primates evolve? Well, climbing trees, in trees, under a green canopy, right? That's what our cells evolved for. If we're going to have that conversation, which everybody loves to discuss in this biohacking world, and especially the niche circadian health world, what we evolved with. What did we evolve with? What did we evolve with, guys? What did we evolve with, everybody? What did we evolve with?
Yeah.
We evolved under a green canopy
General.
with a chlorophyll spectra.
Yeah.
And what does chlorophyll do? Well, I measured it with my spectrometer, so I know. Chlorophyll reduces the visible part of the light spectrum, including the short wavelengths, 60 to 70% relative to near infrared. But there's what's called a near infrared plateau, where chlorophyll in plants reflect basically all near infrared around, give or take, 740 nanometers. All of that's reflected back. That's really good for our cells, right? We know that. You guys know that. It doesn't mean the other stuff is all bad all the time, but that's what we evolved to be in a chlorophyll-rich environment. Anytime people have moved to environments rich in snow, rich in sand and desert, or rich in water, they attempted to use sun protection. People in India have very high rates of cataracts, people who live outdoors. So artificial light, let's just be clear, also contributes to these serious issues like macular degeneration and so on. We have an epidemic of macular degeneration. There's a lot of nuance, you can see, Bart, to this topic, and some people have a hard time understanding nuance. But when you look at this, you say, well, for example, in Germany alone, the surgery, the injections for the eye diseases, cataracts, macular degeneration, and so on. I think it's macular degeneration, but these injections are something like a $4 billion a year market just in Germany. The United States, it must be 10 times that. I don't even know exactly. I'm going off the German data because that's what we discuss.
Yeah.
That's a small fraction of the world, right? So billions and billions of dollars are going for injections into the eye to treat eye diseases. And wait, the majority of people are spending 92% of their time indoors. So I'm not going to stand here and blame the sun for this issue. Clearly, artificial lights are contributing. And of course, we agree with that. We've been producing the highest quality, most attractive science-based blue light protection for years to protect from the risks of indoor artificial light, right?
Yeah.
But anytime humans were in these environments, sand, snow, water, they typically try to protect. In India, people have very high rates of cataracts without sun protection, right? And these are people who live outdoors. So it's not either or. It's not that the sun is always good and artificial light is always bad, or that the sun is always bad and artificial light is always good. Neither are true. It's not black and white. Artificial light is, at this point, generally quite bad, suboptimal. Sunlight for health is essential. In excess, it becomes toxic. So, and you can experience that with the sunburn. So back to the chlorophyll spectrum, just for one moment. When you look at the chlorophyll spectrum, you see a massive shift of the spectrum. It's almost unrecognizable when you look at the spectrum of chlorophyll. I literally stood over there in that corner. I faced the asphalt with my spectrometer, and I turned around 180 degrees towards the chlorophyll, the grassy field, without moving my feet. And I saw completely different light spectrum just from the direction I was facing, which means the chlorophyll spectrum changes things. It shifts the balance of the light spectrum towards these healing, regenerative wavelengths of light that we know about, deep red and near infrared, and away from the more deleterious, harmful, photooxidative, short wavelength light, UVA, UVB, HEVL, and even the visible spectrum of light. And this is what we evolved for. This is what we're optimized for. And this is what our new lens technology, BlueSync, works on. This same principle of shifting the balance of the light spectrum from the more deleterious short wavelength light toward the more healing and regenerative longer wavelength light. The only difference is that we shift the visible part of the spectrum. Instead of having a peak in the green range, it's in the blue range in order to activate the circadian impact. Or if somebody's using the lenses outdoors, to not blunt the circadian impact of the sun. So when you're outdoors, you're still getting the full circadian impact, unlike traditional or regular sunglasses, which reduce the whole spectrum, basically reducing the circadian impact of daylight, making you more tired, making you less physiologically active, making you have a weaker amplitude of light during the day, which is not good for health. Because the two most important things when talking about circadian health is having a strong amplitude during the day of light, during the daytime phase, and a strong amplitude, maximal amplitude of darkness and absence of light at night. And that's what our sunset lenses work on at night. BlueSync is the first lens ever designed to work on the amplitude of the circadian rhythm during daytime while also providing protection from the most harmful short wavelengths of light. And finally, I would add, there's been a practice I've read articles about, friends send them to me all the time, called forest bathing. Going out in the forest, and everybody finds it super healing and regenerative. Well, why? Because you're bathing in near infrared light, deep red and near infrared light, plus a balanced visible spectrum with a reduction in the shortest wavelengths and a peak in green, which we know to be balancing, calming, relaxing as a color, physiologically and psychologically.
Yeah. And just to translate this a little bit for the average person, there's a lot of context to this. It's very complicated. The more that you dig into it, the more
I think it can be simple, actually.
it can, but we can also simplify it, which is what I try to do right now.
Yeah, of course, please.
You need some sunlight. Don't overdo it. Acclimate slowly. Mind your circadian rhythm at night, which is why you have the darker red glasses.
Yeah, sunset lenses.
For the day, if you had at least some UV coming into your eyes for dopamine, serotonin, etc. If you're out all day, then you could use the BlueSync lenses that you're wearing right now, which reduce the amount of UV, let the part of the blue through that activate the circadian rhythm, so you feel awake, and yeah,
and transmit all the healing deep red and near infrared. The key point about BlueSync is that it selectively conditions or modifies the blue light spectrum. We would say even enhances the light spectrum because it's selectively filtering out short wavelength blue light. So below approximately 440 nanometers, 450 and below, it's tapering off significantly. And this is the range of blue light called HEVL, high energy visible light. It's like the kind of little sister of ultraviolet A light. It's also quite powerful, but it's not going to cause a sunburn. It's not going to have the effects as clearly, as quickly, but it will have these photooxidative effects over longer periods of time, such as sitting in an office 8 hours a day and then under your artificial lights at home, or being in the sun for extended periods of time. So essentially, by blocking, so BlueSync blocks the more harmful, we'll call it, short wavelength blue light or HEVL, in addition to UVA and UVB, while transmitting the blue light that we'll call it circadian activating longer wavelength blue light above 450 nanometer, which is beneficial and highly desirable during daytime for maximizing the amplitude of the daytime phase of the circadian rhythm. So what makes BlueSync different from traditional sunglasses, and we don't call BlueSync a sunglass, it does all the things sunglasses do, but much better. Instead of just blocking UVA and UVB, but then reducing the overall visible spectrum, opening up the pupil and allowing more damaging short wavelength blue light HEVL to come in. So by wearing sunglasses, people can actually cause more damage to their eyes by increasing their exposure to high energy visible light HEVL. With BlueSync, you're blocking UVA, UVB, and HEVL. And then the other issue with sunglasses, in addition to potentially increasing exposure to short wavelength blue light or HEVL, high energy visible light, which again can be damaging, similar to UVA, just over longer time periods, or with higher doses, which people are getting a lot of this today from screens and all these things, also from the sun. BlueSync, so traditional sunglasses, again, blunt the circadian impact. They reduce the circadian effect of daylight, whereas BlueSync does the opposite. It amplifies on a relative basis because the sensors in the eye work on a relative basis because they adjust for total intensity. So if you shift the color temperature or the proportion of light towards circadian activating blue, the brain senses more of this, which is why it's so powerful and so stimulating. And therefore, BlueSync is offering both superior protection and superior circadian stimulus while also transmitting the healing and regenerative wavelengths, so superior healing as well.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, I understand.
Back.
Then lastly, are there any new developments for you on your philosophy on the red and the infrared spectrum? You're coming out of the panel. I've heard it's something very special, different at
It's
least.
gonna be cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the only thing you can
The
say.
political situation's making things a little difficult at the moment, but it's not an insurmountable issue. We're moving full speed ahead with our development. It's been 2 years plus in development now because, well, we said we don't want to make the 151st. At this point, it's like the 300th red light panel that's the same as everything else. We want to do something truly unique and different. And so, I mean, who knows when will it come to market? Hopefully, really soon. But basically, we're getting closer and closer every day. I would say one of the misconceptions in the red and near infrared light therapy, the photobiomodulation space, is that more intensity is always better. So as I've learned from Dr. Wunsch, many of the early studies were conducted with lasers. And people extrapolated that and said, well, this intensity of the laser was used on a specific acupuncture point. Why don't we use that intensity across the entire body? And his perspective is that that's not necessarily an intelligent extrapolation to make. Just because the light has a specific effect at a certain intensity with a laser on a very targeted point doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be beneficial to take that ridiculously high intensity and apply it across the whole body. So we reject the idea that more intensity is always better. In fact, our perspective is that the benefits of the light often derive more from the informational component because there's energy, intensity, and there's information. That the information has as much or even more of an effect than the intensity. But everybody else, it's like a, whose boat is bigger contest. Oh, we have more intensity, more intensity, more intensity. But more is not always better. And again, this is where we get back to nuance. We're developing the first red light panel and the only red light panel that has an option to utilize biologically compatible and biologically derived frequency modes to activate and stimulate certain processes. A variety of devices in the red light space claim to have certain frequencies, but if you look it up, you can't even see what the frequency is. Well, understandable. Maybe they don't want to share what their secret sauce is, but as far as we've been able to tell, we can't find that they're based on anything really biologically significant. And very few companies are doing this. But what we're prepared to offer is something really revolutionary from the perspective of utilizing frequencies, in other words, modulation, pulsation, for very targeted biological effects. So that is one of the ways in which our panel will be different, in addition to focusing on the best studied, most well-founded wavelength ranges for the desired photobiomodulation effects. So I'm actually very excited to be able to offer this product. It's also beautiful compared to most of the other panels. In my view, it's much more beautiful. And so that's also nice because we're really into beauty and aesthetics. Yeah, I can see that. Well, thank you. We think that, when you look at something beautiful, it even has an effect on your health. It can be a positive benefit. So there's something to that, and we want to bring that out in everything we do with our products. Thank you for the compliment. So anyway, this is these are the developments. I really appreciate you asking, and I'm really glad to speak with you about these topics.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful, Matt. Some very interesting discussions you bring up that we all need to think about, I think. And thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, I look forward to speaking again soon, and especially getting you one of the panels and other products when they're ready.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
So much.
Thank you so much. Danke wel.